Hey, how's it going? If you have worked with Microsoft Cloud before, even if you haven't written your own APIs before, you have worked with APIs without knowing. Pretty much everything online under the hood is APIs. Create a user, an API runs. Get a resource, API. Even logging in is an API. APIs are everywhere. Like I said, anything you do online is an API under the hood. APIs stand for Application Interface. It's a way of accessing and doing things to programs. It's universally accepted and used across all platforms. Not only that, it's universally available. As in, you're not limited to one coding language when you write it. Just write it in the language of your choice and fire away. Whether it's PowerShell, Python, JavaScript, curl, you name it. Now, within the context of PowerShell, which is our course, like so far, if you're logging into Azure or Entra ID using PowerShell, you're using a module. APIs, you don't have to. We just make API calls using one commandlet and fire away regardless of which version of PowerShell we're using. And this command is called Invoke-RestMethod. Before we even unpack Invoke-RestMethod, let's talk about all the parts that make an API. APIs are broken into a few components: the method, the URI, the header, and optionally the body. URI, it is the address to talk to a particular API out there. For example, Microsoft services like Azure have one, Graph have another, Google services have their own, Reddit has its own, and on and on and on. They look like URLs that you type on the browser. They usually contain the following. First is the host, whether you're pointing to Graph or you're pointing to Azure. Then there's the version of API, which can change over time. Then there's particular endpoints, which tells it, yeah, okay, Graph, but what of Graph? Is it the users? Is it the resources in Azure? This is where it tells it where to go within those platforms. And you can optionally add to the endpoints filters to narrow down the particular things you're looking for as well. Putting all these pieces together is your URI. The next component is called methods. They're telling the API what actions to take. And here are the key ones. Get, which returns data. Post, which creates data. Put, which replaces data. Patch, which updates and modifies data. And finally, you have delete, which deletes data. So in essence, if you look at a commandlet from, say, the Graph module, get mg user. If you look at it from the API context, get is the method, mg is the host in the URI, and user is the endpoint in the URI. And like get mg user, you can provide it filters. Those would be additional things you can add to the endpoint to narrow down your search. So if you wanted a particular user or all users to start with something in their display name, you can do that with filters in the module and in the API. The same goes for Azure modules. For example, new AZ VM followed by parameters. In this case, new is the method, normally post, but for this API it's actually put. AZ then is the host, VM is the endpoint, and parameters is actually the body, which I'll explain later. And then the next component of an API is called the header. Header section is what holds the metadata of the API that you provide. Like, how will you access the API? As in, do you bear a token that you will use as your authentication piece, aka where your creds will go? And also, you can set the language you plan to speak to the API. In our case, it's most likely going to be JSON. This means the data that we provide to the API is sent in JSON. And you can add more things here as well, but usually token and content type is the norm. We'll come back to the token. Body is the next component and is optional for some APIs. Like when using get commands, you don't have to provide a body, but they are necessary for others. Like when you use the post method to create stuff, like creating users, for instance, you need to provide information about what you're creating, right? Like the display name, first name, last name, UPN, etc., etc. Those are the things that will go into the body. And since we provided the content type in the header as JSON, we'll have to provide the body in JSON to it as well. But with PowerShell, we can just make objects and convert it to JSON at the end. And those are the different components of an API. Now let's discuss tokens. OAuth 2 is the standard as of this video. You'll use a token to make a user or make a resource using the API, where we provide in the API's header this token. Getting a token can be done in a few ways, which I will demo later. But for now, just let's unpack tokens and let me use an analogy. You could think of it like this. When you check into a hotel, you go to the front desk and show your ID or booking information, your creds. The hotel then verifies your identity and confirms you actually have a reservation. That's the login process. Once you're authenticated, the hotel staff programs an access card and gives it to you, aka your token. This access card behaves exactly like an OAuth token would, as in it only works for this hotel, a particular API host. It expires after a set time like reservations of a hotel usually do, and it proves you're already authenticated, as in you're already a guest, so you don't have to show your ID to get a new card every time you need to do stuff. So you can go right into the room, the amenities, and all that. If it expires, as in you booked it for the day and then it's done, you need to go back to the front desk to get another one. It is short-lived on purpose, like your stay at a hotel. If your stay, for example, ends tomorrow at noon, the access card stops working at noon. That's exactly how access tokens behave too. Temporarily by design, usually an hour. Authorization is also built into this access card. Just because you have an access card does not mean you can enter every area in a hotel either. Your access card may give you permissions to access a certain floor, a certain room, whether you can access the gym, the lounge, and probably not the other stuff like other people's rooms or the staff-only areas. And with this access card, you take actions like swiping a room to get inside. That is exactly how tokens work. You put in the header and you swipe with it. Okay, so in a nutshell, coming back into our world, you use your identity to get the token. Your permissions for the identity are already accounted for. Either you already had RBAC assigned to it, or you had Enter ID scopes and roles. Then with this token, you put in the header, like having an access card in your hand, and then you do an API call, swipe a room. If you had the access to do the action, you'll be granted to do so. If not, you'll be blocked. And when your tokens expire, you need to go back to generate a new one to do the same work later. So that's APIs in theory. Now let's get practical and begin exploring APIs through PowerShell against both Azure and Graph. Back to our Visual Studio Code. Let's explore APIs first with user accounts. Our account wants to interact with APIs, and I already have permissions for my account for both Azure and Enter ID. So let's start with Azure. I have on my account many RBAC roles as an admin. Now with the user account, I have no choice but to do an interactive login first to Azure in order to get my token. This isn't mandatory when you use app registration, nor some managed identities, but it is with a user. I guess it's because as a user, there's a lot more things involved, like you're MFAing and you have conditional access and all these gates in place. So you want to make sure that they go through that process before you can even use the APIs as a user. And what we can use to authenticate in is either PowerShell or Azure CLI. We will stick with PowerShell. And by sticking with PowerShell, I mean we will use AZ module for this part. We'll run 2 commandlets from the AZ module, but after that, I am fully going to use APIs. And then I'll show you later how we don't even need them if you use service principals. So the first command, as always, is connect AZ account. So I'm just going to run that and sign in. It doesn't matter what subscription you're signed into, just sign in. But once I'm signed in and I want to get my token, because right now I just have my creds, I don't have a token. In order to get my token, there's a command called get AZ access token. And it only has one parameter that we need called resource URL. Now, what do we enter here? So for Microsoft, there's 2 URLs to know. One is for Azure and one is for Graph. I'll show you the Azure one right now. It's called management.azure.com, just like that. If I run this, look what shows up. I'm going to save this as a variable. Let's just call it token for now. So what is this resource URL? This is what becomes your audience. You will see it written as AUD, A-U-D. It is what I can interact with using my tokens or my APIs going forward. So I just ran this to get a token to ARM in Azure. If I wanted to, for example, connect to Graph, instead of this, I would type this, graph.microsoft.com. But we'll come back to that later. Now let's peek inside token, the variable. It gives me a few things. You can see, for example, the user ID that this token is for, so my account, what type it is, bearer, which we'll talk about later, and then tenant ID, and then when it expires, which is an hour from now. And then finally, you get something called token. Now it's encrypted via secure string, so you won't be able to see it. Let me just type token, right? You see nothing. However, if you ever worked with secure strings before, all you do is convert from secure string as plain text. Okay, looks a little cryptic, doesn't really tell me much. Now, instead of just using it, let's actually see what it actually is. So I'm gonna actually, rather than copying it, type the word set clipboard. And now if I paste, it's actually saved. Good tip to know for PowerShell. And let's actually head on over to the internet, because I want to show you something. Let's open a browser and type the word JWT, because that is what that token is, .ms. This is a website by Microsoft, by the way. And we can use this to decrypt what we just saw in plain text so that we can actually read it. So as soon as I type it here, it broke all the different sections down that are separated by a period down here. And look what's here. The main things I want to point out are, well, you can see type. So JWT, this is our token type, which stands for JSON Web Token. It is a type of token that's widely used today, and that's all you really need to know about it. Then you have your audience, AUD, as I mentioned earlier. So this is what this token is for. This is for Azure ARM, as in making resources, interacting with the ARM side of Azure. And then you can see here ISS. This means issuer. So when we made a request to get this token, it was this URL that gave it to us. And then there's other stuff, but over here you can see EXP. This is your expired date time. This is something that's called epoch time. If you want to convert it, you can look up how to do that, but it's about an hour from now. But let's scroll down. Look, an app ID. Is this my user ID? I could search in Google, in Azure, but I'll just tell you it's not. This is where it gets interesting when you use tokens as a user for Azure. This is not my actual user ID, but some Microsoft app, because APIs need some app to authn in, so it needs a client ID, not a user. So Microsoft just gives this to us to use. It's not something that's in our tenant either. You won't find it if you search it. And then when you scroll down, look, it has information about me, right? And then there it is. My actual user ID is in OID. So it still shows up, but it's just not going to be in where you normally expect it. And then it gives you all this other information about me. Now, what's interesting is here, SCP. This is usually where scopes go, as in your permission. So for my user, it actually says user impersonation. This just means that this app right here that Microsoft created for us, it is impersonating as me. So whatever it does is going to be using my account and my roles and my all of that and do that stuff. And the reason why you don't see the roles here is because this is RBAC roles. So using Azure, if I use Graph, you'll actually see my roles there, like user rewrite all and all that. But if you don't see it here, that's because we signed into ARM, and ARM, there's way too many RBAC roles to list here. It will probably be more data than the token itself. But that's the token. Like, look at that. We get a token, we can actually see what's in a token. So you should be careful with them, because not only if someone else has a token can use it, they can actually get information about you and your org and all the perms and all the rest using this too. Either way, we have our token. Let's make our first API call. And the commandlet that I mentioned we'll use is called Invoke-RestMethod. And when you type that and you press dash, you can see all the things that I mentioned that are components of an API show up. So if I type method, it shows up. If I type URI, it shows up. If I type headers, it shows up. If I type body, it shows up. Of course, there's other things you can do with this commandlet for PowerShell, but these are really it for APIs that you need to know at this stage. So what should we do? Why don't we try to get all of our subscriptions? The equivalent of that was get AZ subscription. We type that, we get our subscriptions and all the data about it. Let's do the equivalent using APIs. Now, how do you go about even figuring out what to type here? And that's what I'll go through today as well. Rather than just typing the commands, let's actually explore how to get the commands. So in your browser, what do we want to do? We want to list subscriptions API Azure. Those are the keywords. And then the first link will take you there. And if you click it, you can see all the different kind of commands you could run against subscriptions. You can get and list. So get will be about a particular subscription. So you have to actually give the subscription ID. List is about getting all subscriptions. So that's why I said the word list. So when you look in here, this is what it gives you. Like, what is this? That's all you give me? This is all you really need. It's telling you the method and it's telling you the URI. It's written as a HTTP request syntax for you to take and convert into your language of choice, whether that's curl, Python, or in our case, PowerShell. It gives us enough information to work with, believe it or not. Like, we got the URI and we got the method. And this page does not indicate anything about body. There's no mention of body, right? Because get commands, as I mentioned, don't really have bodies. So what we can do is let's copy this over and bring it back to our Visual Studio Code and paste it here for now. And I'll just comment it out because we don't actually use that. And let's fill out this using this. So in my method, I'll just put in quotes get. This I'll copy over here and put in a variable called URI. And then the body, as I said, we don't need, so let's omit it. Now, if I just ran this, it will not work. Headers are missing. So I need a variable called headers with my token that I've extracted right here. So what do? It's actually very simple to write. And this is probably the header you're gonna write pretty much every time. So header, you put it in a hash table, and then you just give it values like this. The first value is called authorization, and the second is called content type. The content type, most of the time, is just going to be application/JSON. So this is what implies what language we're going to use for our API, right? So that's all we said here. And then authorization, it's always the same here as well. So when we looked at token, we saw the word type bearer. That is what you type first. Then you hit the space bar and you provide the token itself. So token.token like that, right? In this case. And I may have to type it like this, partial. But this won't work because it's a secure string. So what we really should do is, since we need it as a secure string and we don't really care about all this other information, why don't we go back to our token? Let's actually only extract the token from it. And then let's use our convert from secure string as plain text. So that now when we run this, we just get our value and then we just store it here as token. Right, makes sense? I clear the screen and then I bring this here. Let me just make sure there's an S here. Oh, and there it is. Now if I run this, we should be able to get our subscriptions using the token we just generated at line 7. Okay, I got something as a return. Cool. It comes as a value with some data inside it. It's kind of hard to read like this. So what we should do is make this into a variable as well. And by the way, now that I have the token, I don't even need to use it for the next hour. Like I can just run these 2 lines for all my APIs as long as I'm using the same token and it's fine. So let's look at our return. Just gonna keep this together and let's see what's within value. Okay, there you go. There's our data. The nice thing about Invoke-RestMethod is often, not always, you'll get the return as objects. So technically this was JSON, but Microsoft kind of fixed that for us and returned as object. So return.value is giving back our data. That's awesome. And if I wanted to look at one subscription, I can, do the same thing. If I wanted to see the IDs, I can do that. All the things that we're used to doing, we can do with APIs. Now, I only want the IDs. So what I'll do is instead of getting all this return, let's actually change it a little. I'll just call this sub IDs and I'll put this like that. Do value dot. In fact, I don't want this ID. I want this one because that's the resource ID. So I actually don't want that. Let's actually go with subscription ID. So now if I run this, we'll have our IDs, right? And all of this was done without using the AZ module, right? From here to here. Now, what do I want to do with the sub IDs? Why don't we collect all resources within each of those subscriptions? Right? Something we've done literally on our first episode. So let's do that. Now, the way to get resources is, let's say I wanted to list all resources. Again, list, because get means get a particular one. So list resources Azure API. There it is. And then we get the same HTTP, right? I'll copy that over, paste it, comment it out. And then this is our new URI. And then this is our new get command. Now, the one thing you may notice is in the URI over here, it's asking for the subscription ID. Hence why I was getting it. So we're going to have to loop through each subscription because we have 3 subscriptions, 3 different APIs. One to get it from one subscription, the other subscription, another subscription, right? So the command that we're going to do just to write the URI part, and then we'll build around it, is URI equals this. However, Over here, we'll inject subscription ID without the S. And then because we're running it 3 times, maybe let's store it in a generic list. So let's do that. I'll say resources equals. This will make us an empty list. And then what we will do is for each sub ID in sub IDs, put this in there. And then what we will do is response equals, and you can just copy this. Invoke-RestMethod, blah, 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 dot value. Hey, before I even put it in the list, let's just run this. Like, we're going to use the same header because we already have the token. But instead, we're going to overwrite the URI and use this one in here. So if we run this, we should just get a list of all of our resources. But of course, they're in value. So what I should have done, sorry, is put it dot value. And then when I run it, you get all the resources that in my tenant. And look how quick that was. And also note that when you use the get AZ module, you have to do set AZ context to switch between subscriptions. I didn't even have to do that. Another cool thing to note, right? Either way, let's actually put this in our resources. So I'll do resources.add response. So now if I run this, it's done. I type resources, we get them. So now if I do resources.name, I get all my resources, right? That are in my tenant. Cool. Now let's take this one step further. If I look at my resources, I have all different kinds of resources, right? What if I only wanted all my NSGs, for example? Like I could do an API call directly to NSGs, but I already have the resources. Why don't we do that here? And yes, I could just do, where object to this. But I'm talking about something else. On the search query itself, why don't we filter there? So let's go back to this page because it actually tells you here. Like here's an example with optional parameters that it's giving you. And if I scroll down and look at filter, it will actually give me some more information. So here's a one for virtual networks. Let's copy that. And then we'll use this as our use case and modify this. So filters equals resource type equals the type. See how it has these types here? So if I had virtual networks, which I don't in my tenant as of right now, that's what we would write here. So like storage accounts, if I wanted them, I would type that there. Now, how do I make this work for PowerShell? It's pretty easy. Type filter. This will be the variable that I'll inject into the URI. And if we look back in that, copy this. And if you look back into this, $filter equals the variable filter. Okay, easy enough. Now, I'm going to actually do a different order. So let me just break this down. So you see question mark filter, and you see an and then you see an and then you see an and. And I want to highlight this for a particular reason first. So anything before the question mark is your URI host followed by the endpoint. The host is this part and the endpoint is this part. So after that, basically what you're saying is these are all going to be parameters that we're adding. And the $sign just means here's another parameter. So question mark means you're starting the parameters. $sign means, okay, the lines before this was one parameter. And then the lines after this is another parameter. And then you can see at the end is the API version. In my example here, it's the first thing, and I'm just going to leave it as that. But now if I wanted to add filters, I'm not going to add a question mark. Instead, I'm going to add a $sign or ampersand. Did I say $sign? I meant to say ampersand. So the ampersands are what come after the question mark. Okay. So now after this, I can just add my filter variable. And a clean way to do that is to just do a plus filter. Makes it easier to read and edit. Or you can do it like this. I just prefer this. This makes it a little easier to see all the different variables. Okay, so filter equals quotes. I want to add this in there. This is not saying my filter is called $sign equals this. So I'm not actually writing this in here. In fact, this is what I'm writing in there, including the $sign. So if I put this in there, and I think I forgot to copy, but there's a single quote here for virtual networks. Problem is, this filter with a $sign, I needed to write it as $sign filter, not variable filter. And in order to do that, very easy, You just put a backtick in front of it. And look, it just turned into green, indicating that it's just text now, right? So now if I run this and do filter, filter equals blah, blah, blah. It's actually writing that. And if I didn't have it, just to show you, it's putting the variable, so it's doubling, right? So yeah, put the backtick $sign to make a $sign into a $sign. And then, like I said, I don't have virtual networks. I have NSGs, so I'll write that. And that should do it. I'm going to remove all this. This was just for us. Let's try running it again and see what our response is. Resources. Why did you not work? Oh, I must have left the $sign. Sorry about that. So yeah, and filter. Okay, now let's type resources. Okay, perfect. NSG, 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 right? So if we do type, all we got is all the NSGs I have in my tenant, which is oddly enough a lot. Yeah, so does that make sense, right? You provide a host, you provide a endpoint, and then you put a question mark to say this is the start of adding parameters. You provide a parameter, and then you put an ampersand to say there's going to be additional parameters. And then we just add our filter variable, which contains our parameter, which is filter equals resource type, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's get. Let's continue on. Let's look at, why don't we make a storage account? So let's do that. I will go back to the internet and type create storage account Azure API. I'm just showing you how I get this, so it's wired into your brain. All right, this is how you create an Azure storage account using REST API. Put, not post. I know in the beginning I said post is how you make stuff, but for Azure ARM, our audience only likes to use this put, not post. Graph will use post, so confusing. So let's copy that and paste it here. And look, there's a lot more stuff here. This time we need the subscription ID, we need to have a resource group, and then we need the storage account name. All right, now, I'm not going to show you how to get resource groups. It's all there. If you want to explore how to get them, you can do that. I'm just going to fill out some data here. So I'll say subscription ID equals this, resource group equals this, and then storage account name, okay, equals this. Equals this. So I have 3 variables. And then for my URI, I will paste this and fill out my variables into it. Okay, cool. And then we can do the same Invoke-RestMethod. I'll copy that from there, remove all this extra stuff. And then as you remember, it's put, not get. So we'll do that. Now, will this work? Let's try it. It did not. Now, funny enough, this is not even the error I was going for, but it's good that it happened. You see how I have my variable here with a question mark? That's going to break the URI. Like if I look at the URI now, look at that. Storage accounts is followed by nothing, followed by a slash and then a dash. And then it's going all the way to version. So somehow or another, all this got omitted. It's always a good habit that whenever you're going to make variables, to write them like this. So you're injecting what's in the parentheses without interfering with anything outside. Now, it's still not going to work because we don't have a body. But recall when I said, when you're using get command, it's optional. But for this, there is more data to be had. And just think about it. If you're making a storage account, what do you provide? A resource group name and a subscription ID? No, there's way more stuff, right? You provide, if it's a storage LRS, you provide a location, right? Like where's it going to be? And you provide other properties if you like too. So what do we do here? We go back to our page and scroll down and look at that, request body. And then it will give you an example of what you can add. You can add the SKU, the kind, and the location. It's giving you in JSON. Remember when I said bodies are in JSON? Like we could just write this as body. Like we could just write this and then put all of our stuff in there and it would work. It would work, but it's JSON, right? Why would you want to use JSON when you can use objects? Because now you have to remember all the little commas, the little double quotes. If you like it, okay, go ahead. But I personally would prefer not to use it until I need to. So let me just move this down here. So this will be after. And then we'll put body. So what do we do instead is we make an object and then we fill out our variables. So location equals Canada Central. Then we say SKU equals, and you saw in the SKU, it had this format. So we're actually going to use that, but in PowerShell format, AKA hash table, then a hash table, standard LRS, and then kind equals storage count v2, right? And that should be it. Should be enough for us. If you want to add more stuff, you can. JSON. So now if we run this, we get our JSON. Perfect. So let's try this now. No output, which is good actually in this case. That means something happened. Go to our Azure. Give it a sec. Okay, there you go. And there it is. Our storage account got created. And if there's other fields you want to add, you just add them to the body. And let's actually do that as our next task. I've shown you get. I've shown you how to create stuff. Let me show you how to modify stuff. I'm not going to keep going to the internet, but let's just move along. For our next task, let's do patch. And the good thing is we can use the same URI because we're modifying this exact same thing. And what we will do is we can actually use all of these data points, but instead I am patching. So meaning I'm going to update this. So these things are already a part of it. What I really want to add is tags. And tags are always written like this, and it will still work here. So I'll say the owner tag, which will be me, environment, which we can say, I don't know, environment, production, and let's do cost center equals 0, whatever you want to do. Now, as a test, I'm just going to add something. We'll say test. So I have a tag already in place. We know where I'm going with this. And then let's do a Invoke-RestMethod. Same thing, but this time, let's do the word patch. So let's see what happens when we do this. Okay, give us output. I don't know why put doesn't when it creates, but we got one here. And you can see that it added some tags. And if I refresh, it added them. But my test one is gone. So in PowerShell, there is a merge option. With this, not so much. I'll leave that to you to figure out. My hint is to use the get method to get the current tags of this resource and then add them here as well. Okay, finally, our last one is going to be delete. And it's pretty much the same as all this, right? What are you going to delete? It's going to be a particular storage account, so I need the URI of it. And what am I going to do to it? I'm just going to run this command without a body because delete doesn't need one. This is deleting something without filling out stuff. And type the word delete. Now let's run it. No output, which is good. Let's go to our storage account. And look, it's deleted. So yeah, that's APIs in a nutshell. Not that difficult once you start getting the hang of it. I'll keep drilling more examples. But you may be wondering, why use this? Why use APIs? I have modules that can do all this. Like, what's the point? Well, the main benefit, as you know, is anyone with any language can use APIs to do this exact work because APIs are universal. So they're not tied to using PowerShell or Azure CLI. They can do it with Python, JavaScript, etc., etc. Okay, sure, but that doesn't mean anything to me as someone using PowerShell, right? Well, let's unpack some stuff. While it's a bit different to write, it's a lot faster in some ways to work with. Like, I didn't have to switch my subscription context. I can provide right into the URI, the subscription, and interact with the resource directly. If I wanted to get stuff, I didn't have to switch between them as much. I can just say, on this subscription, go do this. On then this subscription, go do this. And then come back to this subscription, do this. In PowerShell, I'm like, switch context, switch context, switch context, which can be annoying. And then, like I said, there's no modules needed. Sure, I had the authentication part at this point to get the token, right? But that's only because I'm using it as a user. We got to think more in automation sense. Like, I made a function app in the last episode. I didn't have to use any module stuff at all. I could have just used APIs and just get the work done. And even if I needed them, instead of downloading the whole AZ module, I could have just downloaded AZ accounts and be able to do this, which will shrink the amount of space modules are taking up in my apps. And let me show you something else. If I go AZ module PowerShell gallery, look what version they're on, 15.1. If I go to my automation account and I select my runtime environment, look what version AZ they have, 12.3. How would I get 15 here? And that'd be pretty annoying because Microsoft and automation accounts likes to be a little behind. But then what if there's a new commandlet that got added and I needed to access it in an automation account, but I have this version? Would I have to install all the different modules separately, upload them like I'm kind of doing with Graph here? That's going to be annoying if I need it for everything. I can just use the API and bypass this whole process. That is actually an issue I ran into in a previous script that I was making for my post subscription deployment. I used a commandlet that's newer than what's showing up in this version, so it's actually not even working automation account. So now I have to use the API route to make it work. Let's not forget something here. How am I using my identity here? If I scroll here, my headers have a variable called token, right? I can generate with another identity, another token, and then I can use one token against here with its own header, and then I can have a second header that uses the tokens in here, and then both tokens can exist at the same time. So you can have 3, 4 tokens, and they're running simultaneously in your script, and rather than having to do connect AZ account, do stuff, and then sign out and sign into another connect AZ account and do stuff, and then sign into Graph, do stuff, sign into another Graph, do stuff. You can have all the tokens and just seamlessly work with all of them at the same time, which is pretty powerful, I think. And also what you're learning here, if you're new to APIs, isn't just Azure and Graph. This goes well beyond this. Literally anything is open to you once you figure out how APIs work. For example, say you want to send tickets to ServiceNow or make stories and tasks in Azure DevOps or GitHub. Getting used to it now using Graph and Azure means you're going to be prepared to use it on those platforms. Because when you go to their docs, they'll give you something similar to what I've been showing you when I go into Google. And then you already know how to make the header and figure out how to get the body data and all that. And then you can start working with it. Like I have automations in my workplaces where I'm automatically generating tickets based off alerts. I'm not even firing emails. Like I wish I could demo that, but I don't have a ticketing platform for you to show you in my lab environment. But it is possible. And like if I wanted to take this even further personally, like as a content creator, I can have it so that when my videos are uploaded to YouTube, I can have a trigger to LinkedIn to post my video that has just been created. And before that, I may need an API to YouTube to collect information on the title and the description, maybe even the transcript to kind of parse out what it is and use that in the LinkedIn post itself. And maybe I can send myself an email letting me know when it's been sent to LinkedIn. I can use Graph API, not just with Entra, but with my personal Hotmail or Outlook account. The possibilities of automation are just opening everywhere. All these people are using N8N workflow automation. You're just doing APIs behind the scene because you don't know how to code. You can just do it from this. You know what I mean? Like I can send APIs to ChatGPT too from this, right? So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say here. But of course, like all these other platforms will have their own rule sets and requirements. So you'll still have to Google how to do it on them, but the foundations of how to work with APIs is right here. Anyways, let's move back. Why don't we switch over to Graph? How do we do that? Let's bring our code from up here down here. And then instead of this, it is graph.microsoft.com. And let me just give this a different variable name. Let's say MG token. So we can still keep our Azure one, right? So now I have this and I have this. I can do API calls to both. So MG token, let me actually set it to clipboard. Let's go to the website again. jwt.ms. I'm going to paste it here. It's similar, but it's different. You can see our audience has shifted now for this token. Cool thing to see here is the scopes. These are all the scopes I have as a user, and it's showing it. Unlike with Azure ARM and RBAC, it didn't show anything. Here it actually shows the graph permissions I actually have. But let me show you something. Let me give you another bonus here. Like it's nice that we're going to this website, but you don't even have to go here. Like you can do this in the terminal. But at the end of the day, this is just base 64 code. One thing I will say is this is broken in 3 parts, right? The red section, the blue section, and the green section. We only need the blue section. I just Googled this, right? So I'm not gonna really try to explain it too much. I don't even know. Payload equals MG token. Split all the sections where the periods are. I'm gonna play Where's Waldo, look for it, but there's 2 periods separating the red, blue, green. And what I want is the middle one. Then I want to replace a few things. If there's any minus signs or dashes, I want to make them plus. Why? I don't know. And then I want to replace another thing, which is any underscrolls, replace it with a slash. Okay? So if I do payload, it's going to be slightly slimmer because some of the sections are gone, right? Cool. Next is adding equal signs. Again, don't ask me why. I don't know. I'm just the messenger. 4 minus payload dot length. So you minus it by 4. And then you do, what do you call this? Radial? Modular? Yeah. Modular 4. Which just means get the remainders in 4. And then outside 4 again. All right, and then payload. This is where you actually add the plus signs. Payload plus I don't even know why I'm typing this out. I should just copy it. And then payload, whatever. And finally, you convert it to JSON string using some .NET magic, and then you convert it from JSON to an object. Okay, just copy this. I don't know. I'll paste it in my GitHub. And then you run that, look what shows up. Same stuff. So now you don't need to go to the website. You can just pull it out from here, right? So my scopes and all that stuff is showing up. Great. Okay, moving on. Now what do we want to do? We want to Graph API list groups. Cool. Okay, a lot more cryptic this time, right? Just get /group. It's not even telling you the host. It's just telling you the endpoint. But if you just scroll further down, it tells you, so it's fine. All right, so how do we write this? It's the exact same process. That's what I'm trying to highlight here. Like, there's not much different than what we've already done, but I thought just to show you graph, I'll still just go there. All right, so what are we gonna do here? We're gonna first make the headers, because I don't have a header for MG token. Instead of typing it, let me just copy this, because it's the exact same as I mentioned, only this time it is MG token. And then our URI is right here. And then our groups, let's do Invoke-RestMethod. Method is get, URI is URI, headers is headers. No body because it's a get command. Don't need it. Okay. Nothing errored out. Cool. Dot value. There's our groups. So if I do .0, there's one group, right? ID, blah, 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 blah. Let's actually use this one. Classic thing to do is, hey, I want to get all the members. How do I get all the members? Same thing. Let's say list group members graph API. Scroll down. There it is. It's the same URI, but ID and then members. So we can actually just take this, put ID there, and then type members, right? And we have an ID here. So we'll inject that in there. Just like that. And we'll paste this here and change this to members. All right, so let's see what's in members. Cool. Value. Cool. Maybe we can do a select object. I don't want all this stuff. What do we want? We can do display name and ID, and then let's do this thing too. There you go. This group has a group as a member and then 2 users. Perfect. So you can see interacting with Graph is the exact same principles. That's really it. If you understand the fundamentals, what I've been sharing here, you know how to discover and do API against Azure, Entra ID, Microsoft 365, Exchange, etc. But so far, I've only shown you how to do it as a user. I think it's only right if I show you service principles and managed identities today as well. And let's start with app registration / service principles. For app registration, you could do the same AZ account process. So sign in, connect AZ as the service principal, and then run all this. But let's not use that. Let's make a new scenario. The scenario is, I don't have modules. How do I do that? Okay, one thing I am going to do is connect as myself. And why am I doing that? Is because I have my service principal secrets and all that stored in a key vault. And I'm not planning on not using that in my environment. But if you want to save them as plain text in what I'm about to show you, go for it. All right, you won't, like I said, you won't need modules. So these are the only command lists from AZ I'm running because of that reason. right? I'm getting my client ID. I'm getting my tenant ID, which is stored in the secret, whatever reason. And then I'm collecting the client secret for this client ID. I'm just going to run all three. And then if I show you tenant ID, it actually has the value. You have these values saved, right? So how do we get a token? Because so far we had to connect in order to get it, right? So how do you get a token for an identity without signing in? We do so with an API. Wait, we can run APIs without a token? Yes. I'll show you. This is a very particular one, and I've actually demoed this many times in my videos already, every time I was using a service principal. In order to get a token, you can use your creds like these for your service principal from Microsoft, and then it will return you the token when you use that. So what are we basically running? We are running the equivalent of this commandlet, right? The equivalent of this commandlet as an API. Just like this, what we need is a resource URL. And let's do Azure again. You type that, but there's one additional thing you'll add, which is .default. It's just the way it is. And the URI you're going to use is actually login.Microsoft Online. And then what you're going to add to it is tenant ID and then the endpoint, which in this case is a token. So this is your host. To this tenant, you're getting the token. And this one, this particular command actually has a body. So we'll do that. And what you provide in here is the client ID written like this, scope, which is the resource. So this will be the client ID, scope, which is the resource URL that I've written here, client secret right here, and finally grant type. What are we granting by coming here? We're granting using credential. We're getting a token using Invoke-RestMethod. Method is post, is creating a token, URI, body. So let's run all this and see what happens. Something got stored in our variable. Very much similar to when we ran this command. It had the type and all that. Most importantly, it has access token. And it's in plain text. I don't care about the other things, so I'm just going to write access token like this. And I'm satisfied with that. And then why don't we do the same thing that we did earlier? Let's I'll call this SP token. Move this here. And let's run it and see if we get an output. That actually did work. It just gave one subscription, and that is because this account only has access to one subscription. If you only have access to certain things, it will only give you data on what you have access to. Good thing to know. So if you ever run this and you're like, yeah, these are all the subscriptions I have. It's like, no, you may not have access to them. And then let's use this again. And then put our SP token in it. And let's unpack what we see in here this time. Key thing to highlight is this time the app ID is my actual client ID. So what I had saved here is the same as what's in here. But you won't see scopes anymore, which is strange. That's fine. Point being, I just want to show you the app ID. So what about Graph? Okay, I have another account. Graph, same idea. Only difference is this will shift to graph.microsoft.com. And then you put the same body as you did earlier. And then maybe we'll call this MG token. And since I'm already here, let's just go all the way. We'll say headers equals MG token. And then let's go get some groups. This one should have the same permissions as me to do so. And there you go. The service principal that I have is able to get Graph users just like that. And none of this, minus Key Vault, was using Azure modules. So yeah, I mean, it's that simple, right? Like, it's just a difference in authentication. But once you get that sorted out, it's good to go. Why don't we switch over to Managed Identities? Because a lot of us use them now. And I think it's only fair that we also demo them as well. I'm going to hop into my automation account. I'm going to say that my automation account only has Azure as the compute If you were using hybrid workers, you will have more options. We'll explain that later. But if you're going to use Azure, chances are you're already going to have the AZ module. So you're going to have to authenticate in as the managed identity. And if that's the case, you run the exact same command you already did, which is token equals get AZ access token. And then you got the token. And once you have the token, you can run your commandlets. Like, for example, here I'm displaying the subscriptions. This example works with managed identity on automation account, but it requires the module for AZ. If you want to use this without the AZ module and just go straight from to here, you will have to do it with hybrid workers, meaning you have to have a VM. Or you could do it with function apps, container apps, AKS, etc. Basically something with an IP. So I don't have an example to show you this, but let's just pretend that this is from here to here, a managed identity without module. And I'll give you a URL right here. So if you want to learn more about this, you can. Look here, the URI starts with an IP address. And this is to get your token, right? Now, what is that? Resource equals my host target. But before that, I write this. You remember API PA? It was like an IP address is like 196.254xx. Cloud has it too. And it's actually used for managed identities. So basically in the URI, you're saying, myself, get the token for it for this. And that's it. Like, you use that and then you just, right? And then you can use this right here. Like that. And if I had output, I could show you, but I don't. It's not going to work because it's a local machine. Probably just broke it. It's fine. Clear. And then use it like that, right? And that would display the subscription IDs. Again, I don't have a way to show you unless I whip up a function app. That's just going to take too long to set up and do. So I'm going to avoid that for now, but I promise one day I will show you this. And this is, by the way, for system assigned. Like if you were going to use user assign, you just do one extra thing. What you do is you get your user assigned managed identities ID. Right, so you can say user assigned ID equals, and whatever it is, like 0000000. And like all parameters, you put an and at the end, and do client ID equals user assigned ID. And that's how you could use that too. And everything else is the exact same thing. Either way, we can't demo that. But I will give an extra bonus, which is, did you know you could use managed identities for graph? Now, what I mean is, let me open the browser. Let's go to Enter ID and let's go to app registrations. I have a whole bunch of apps here. For example, this. When I granted it the app roles and scopes and all that, I did it here. API permissions, I granted them. Then it was able to user read write all, application read write all, etc., etc. How do I do the equivalent of this with managed identities? You can. Now let's stay here. So my automation account that's here, let's save this. We'll come back to this and I'll run it at the end. No point running it twice. Automation account here, if I go to identity, so it has an identity registered in Enter ID. So if I go to application, enterprise applications, and I select application type and click manage identities, look what shows up. There it is, my managed identity for the automation account. And if I click it, well, it's a service principal, right? Where do I assign service principals roles? Oh, permissions maybe, right? I don't see anything. Let me open another tab. And let me also open my service principal from here. That is actually my app registration. And if I go to permissions, you will see that it actually has Graph API permissions written here. Now, how do I do it here? There's no option, right? Now, if you have watched my episode where I demystify service principals, app registrations, and enterprise applications, how you do it is actually with PowerShell. When you are in your enterprise applications and you select Microsoft applications, you'll get a whole bunch of Microsoft apps that are in your tenant. And Graph actually sits here. So when I select Graph, you can see Microsoft Graph application right there. So this is what I need to give it permission to. So all those user read write all, etc., they're actually granted for this app. So how do we do that? Well, first let's copy the object ID. You can do it from here, or you could do it from here. So this is our object ID of our managed identity. And what is it that I want to give permission to? As I said, is this. Let's just copy this application ID. I'll show you this way too. So we'll say graph app ID equals. Now I'm going to connect to Microsoft Graph, MG Graph as myself because I have the permissions to modify these things. So I'll do that. And if you want to see what permissions I have, I'll just do get MG context, scopes. I believe you need application read write all and maybe directory read all, user access all. I'm not sure. Definitely application read write all. So I have these two. I'm going to get the actual identity for graph. So I'll say graph SP, service principal, equals get MG service principal filter, because it's an app ID, so I have to search by app ID, equals, oh no, it's a filter, no dashes. This value, this. Okay, I don't care. I'm just going to copy it. I don't know what's happening. I'm just going to copy it. Graph SP. Okay, cool. We get you. Now, what role do I want? Let's say I want to give it user read all. I'll write that as a variable. But if I want another one, I can say group read write all too. Let's just use user for now. The next command is role equals something that exists within here. If you ever click app roles, these are all the apps. It's a huge list, so we can't even scroll through it. So what we're going to do is app roles where object $value equals role name. Now if I run this, okay, let me run the role name first. If I run this, there is our role. But what do we want to do with this role? We need its ID. So I'll store it as a variable and then do params equals $sign. I'm just going to use splatting. But the commandlet is new mg service principal app role assignment. And then $flat. And the values are service principal ID, principal ID, resource ID. Horrible. Resource ID. Why is it doing that? App role ID. Service principal ID is who is being granted. Object ID. Principal ID is also the same. So that works out easily. And then the resource ID is here. .id. And then role ID is role.id. Role? I never ran it. Role? Yeah, role.id. Yeah, and if I run this, my managed identity will have a graph role. Great. And if we go back to my enterprise application and click permissions, there it is. User read all. So that means my automation account can now do get mg users equivalent commandlets. Because the example I'm going to use is groups, let's also give it that. Give it a second. Group as well. Perfect. Go to our automation account and let's set up our code so you can see everything in action. AuthN. This is my API for ARM. And I'll do the same thing. Call it MG. Graph. Get the token. Build the headers, right? Same idea. I don't need to type it. This here. And then our commandlet, our URI was right here. I'm just going to copy that. I need to keep typing at this point. API for graph. Okay, all goes well. Both of those should work because we already have permissions on ARM, so that shouldn't matter. But the graph part is what's going to be interesting to see. Completed. Hit refresh. Look at that. 3 of my subscriptions outputted, and then all those groups outputted. Yeah, awesome. There you have it. That is a full API breakdown with the platform we've been interacting with. Now you know how to do it with a user, service principal, and a managed identity. Now I've already done Graph API stuff, so I made this really nice send email API in a previous video, but there's a lot of work still ahead. Like for example, I would really want to dive into SharePoint. We'll really explore Graph APIs further and how much far we can take that and make a lot of functions out of them, because that'll be fun to write them every time. But for today, I think that covers everything you need to start exploring and tinkering away with APIs. Like if you have ticketing systems, like I said, seriously, look up options for APIs and try to generate tickets with the data you collect in your runbook. Total game changer to just assign people tasks rather than making it after the fact, or even respond to tickets automatically, or trigger jobs automatically. Either way, that's all for this episode. I hope it's insightful. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.